"A city does not belong to the man who owns the most buildings," Raymond Calder once said. "It belongs to the man everyone calls before making a decision." On the morning Mercy Heights Hospital opened its new cardiac wing, Chicago proved him right. A gray July sky pressed low over the south side as black sedans lined the curb and television crews aimed their cameras at a bronze sign bearing the name Evelyn Calder, Raymond's late wife. City council members arrived first, followed by police commanders, judges, pastors, and donors. Raymond stood beneath his wife's name in a charcoal suit and waited until the crowd fell silent without being asked. He was 60, silver at the temples, and calm in the way only powerful men could afford to be calm. For 20 years, people had explained Chicago through him. A union dispute ended after Raymond made a call. A restaurant received its permit after Raymond attended dinner. A candidate found new donors after shaking his hand. No one called these things favors. They called them relationships, the clean language of power. "My wife believed a city reveals its soul by the way it treats people who have nowhere else to go," Raymond told the audience. Behind him, doctors nodded. In front of him, Mayor Thomas Bell smiled as if the sentence belonged to both of them. "This wing will serve families who have spent too long being told to wait." Applause rolled across the plaza. Raymond accepted it with a modest lowering of his head. 5 miles away, Lily Carter sat near the back of a westbound bus with a manila folder pressed against her ribs. The air conditioner rattled but gave off no cold air. A child cried 2 seats ahead. Every pothole made the folder jump in her arms, and she tightened her grip as if the papers inside might escape. She was 22, wore a navy blouse from a thrift store, and had $12 in her wallet. Walter had died 4 months earlier. 7 weeks earlier, after a probate judge appointed Lily independent administrator of his estate, she had filed a wrongful death and survival action in his name. The court had approved her fee waiver application, but certified copies, probate papers, and bus fares had still taken more than her weekly grocery budget. At the first case management hearing, the judge ordered both sides to exchange initial disclosures of potential witnesses and people with relevant knowledge by 5 that afternoon. None of that frightened Lily as much as the final page. At the hospital, Raymond entered a glass corridor while reporters called his name. Cole Mercer, his attorney and oldest advisor, moved between them with the soft efficiency of a man closing doors. Raymond shook hands with the mayor, the hospital president, 2 judges, and a police captain. Each leaned closer when the cameras turned away. "We should discuss the zoning vote," one councilman whispered. "Call Cole," Raymond replied. "My nephew applied to the academy," the captain said. "Call Cole." The words were almost kind. That was what made them final. On the bus, Lily opened the folder again and checked the page labeled Initial Disclosure of Potential Witnesses and Persons with Relevant Knowledge. The case management order allowed her to identify people whose testimony, records, or prior statements might matter, even if their current status was uncertain. 11 names had been typed. 1 had been written by hand because the public library printer stopped working before the final page came out. Raymond Calder. The letters looked too ordinary. She had expected his name to darken the page or make the paper feel heavier. Instead, it sat beneath the others like any other name, followed by the business address of Calder Holdings on North LaSalle Street. The bus announced her stop. Lily closed the folder and ran. The county courthouse stood between 2 taller buildings, its limestone front stained by years of rain and exhaust. She climbed the steps 2 at a time. It was 4:43 in the afternoon. The clerk's office closed at 5. Inside, the security line barely moved. By the time she reached the civil filings window, the clock read 4:57. The clerk, Denise Walker, looked at the stack and sighed without cruelty. "Wrong cover sheet." Lily's face went still. "They gave me that one downstairs." "They gave you the old form." Denise pulled out a fresh sheet. "Fill this out. Fast." Lily wrote with her forearm against the glass. Her father's name appeared twice. Walter James Carter. Deceased. The word seemed colder in government ink. Denise reviewed the case caption, the certificate showing that a copy had been sent to the defense, and finally the initial disclosure. Her eyes stopped at the last name. "Raymond Calder?" Lily nodded. Denise lowered her voice. "You understand that by filing this, You are certifying that you have a good faith basis for saying he has relevant knowledge. I did not add him because I think he is responsible. Then why is he here? Outside, traffic filled the street with a steady metallic hum. Somewhere deeper in the courthouse, a door slammed. Lily looked through the glass and repeated the sentence her father had told her never to say aloud. Because he was in room 814 the night my father died. Denise studied her, then accepted the papers. The seal came down with a hard mechanical crack. At Mercy Heights, Raymond was walking beneath his wife's name when Cole's telephone vibrated. Cole had arranged an automated docket alert for any filing that mentioned Calder Holdings or Raymond personally. He read the docket notice twice, opened the scanned attachment, and turned the screen toward him. 11 names were typed. The 12th was written in blue ink. Raymond ignored his own name at first. His eyes moved through the names above it, one after another, and the warmth left his face. Some belonged to people officially dead. Some belonged to people Chicago had forgotten. All belonged to one night 20 years earlier, when Raymond Calder had stopped asking the city for permission. He looked at the filing caption. Lily Carter, independent administrator of the estate of Walter Carter. Around them, doctors and donors kept smiling beneath the bright hospital lights. Raymond handed the telephone back to Cole. Find out who taught her those names, he said. For the first time that day, no one applauded. By 6 in the evening, rain had begun to erase the edges of the city. Lily stood beneath the courthouse awning with the manila folder tucked under her blouse, protecting the stamped copies from the water. She had expected relief after filing. Instead, she felt watched, though no one seemed to be looking at her. A bus hissed at the curb, and she stepped aboard without noticing the dark sedan across the street. Raymond Calder did not go home. He returned to the top floor of Calder Holdings, where the windows looked down on Chicago as if the city had been built to fit inside them. Cole Mercer placed a printed copy of the initial disclosure on the conference table. 11 names before yours, Cole said. 3 are confirmed dead. 2 left Illinois years ago, for have no recent public records. 1 was declared dead after disappearing. The last is you. Raymond remembered every name. 20 years earlier, they had gathered in room 814 of the Marlowe Hotel, a narrow executive suite with yellow lamps and a broken ice machine in the hallway. At the time, Raymond owned 2 bars, half of a trucking company, and almost no patience. By sunrise, a union leader had resigned, a councilman had changed his vote, and the men who controlled the city had begun treating Raymond as one of their own. Walter Carter had not been invited. He had been a hotel maintenance worker assigned to the conference floor, the kind of man who entered after important people left and restored the room for the next secret. Walter could not have known the arrival order, Raymond said. Someone gave his daughter the list. Cole folded his hands. We can move to strike your name and challenge the complaint. We can also seek a protective order. Not tonight. The longer the filing remains public, the more attention it attracts. Raymond turned toward the windows. Far below, headlights moved through the rain. Attention is not the same as danger. Cole watched him carefully. You recognized the order. Raymond did not answer. The names were arranged exactly as the guests had entered room 814. That detail had never appeared in any public report, court record, or newspaper archive. At 8 in the evening, Lily reached the apartment she shared with her mother in Bridgeport. Their unit was on the 3rd floor, where the ceiling leaked above the kitchen sink whenever the rain lasted more than an hour. Her mother, Diane, sat at the table, sorting medical bills into piles. You filed it? She asked. Lily set the folder down. Yes. And you put his name on it? Yes. Diane closed her eyes. She had not asked which name. Your father told you to let this go. Dad also kept a key taped beneath the bottom drawer of his desk. Lily took a small brass key from her pocket. He left instructions for me. Diane looked at the key as if it belonged to another family. Your father left many things he should have explained while he was alive. Before Lily could answer, the apartment buzzer sounded. Once, then twice. No one visited without calling. Lily went downstairs and found the entrance empty. A white envelope lay beneath the mailboxes. Her name was written across it in block letters. Inside was a photograph of Walter Carter standing beside Raymond Calder at a hotel banquet. Walter wore a maintenance uniform. Raymond wore a black tuxedo. On the back, someone had written a date from 20 years earlier in 4 words. He knew your father. Lily carried the photograph upstairs. Diane stared at it. Throw it away. Why? Because whoever sent it wants you to keep going. Lily placed it beside the court papers. Maybe that is because I should. Across town, Evan Calder entered his father's office without knocking. At 32, Evan had inherited Raymond's height and none of his patience. He dropped his telephone on the table, displaying a local news post about the lawsuit. This is already spreading, Evan said. Then stop reading it, Raymond replied. We should make her understand what she is doing. She does understand. She is 22, which means she has spent 22 years being underestimated. Evan laughed. You are giving her too much credit. Raymond said at last. And you are giving her too little. That is more dangerous. He told Evan to leave the matter to Cole. Evan agreed too quickly. After he left, Raymond opened a locked drawer and removed an old hotel key card. Room 814 was printed across the front in faded gold letters. He had kept it for reasons he no longer admitted. At 10:30 at night, Lily's telephone rang. The caller identification showed a blocked number. She answered, but said nothing. An older woman spoke first. Your father told me you would file after he was gone. Lily gripped the edge of the table. Who are you? Helen Price. Lily looked at the disclosure. Helen Price was the first name. A probate notice in Walter's papers said that Helen had been declared legally dead after more than 7 years missing. That is not possible, Lily said. A court order is not the same as a body, Helen replied. Her voice was low and tired. I have lived under my married name for 11 years. Walter knew where I was. Lily glanced toward the kitchen, where her mother stood frozen beneath the leaking ceiling. Why are you calling me? Because the page you filed is not merely a witness list. It is the order in which they will turn on Raymond Calder. How can you know that? Because I am the first name, and I have already retained a lawyer. The call ended. Lily tried to return it, but there was nothing to return. At Calder Holdings, Cole entered Raymond's office carrying a second report. We found a recent legal contact under Helen Price's married name, he said. She may be alive. Raymond looked at the rain crawling down the glass. Where? Her attorney will not say. For the first time in 20 years, the city below him did not look owned. It looked awake. 3 days later, Lily found an address written on the back of an expired library card inside her father's desk. The small brass key fit a storage facility near the Chicago River, less than 3 miles from the Marlowe Hotel. Diane watched from the kitchen doorway as Lily slipped the key into her coat pocket and placed her probate appointment papers in the manila folder. You do not know who called you, Diane said. She knew about the list. That does not mean she knew your father. Lily looked at the photograph on the table. Walter stood beside Raymond Calder with the careful posture of a man trying not to be noticed. Someone knew him. Diane turned away. That is what frightens me. At Calder Holdings, Raymond sat alone with the disclosure and the old key card from room 814. The city was pale beneath the morning clouds. Cole Mercer entered carrying a folder that was thinner than Raymond expected. Walter Calder worked at the Marlowe for 11 years, Cole said. Maintenance, electrical systems, audio equipment, anything the hotel did not want to replace. He was assigned to the conference floor on the night of the first meeting. That does not explain the order of the names. No, it does not. Cole placed a second page on the desk. The hotel used an internal recording system in several executive suites. Officially, it was for conference services. Walter maintained it. Raymond looked at him. Room 814? The surviving records are incomplete. Records become incomplete when someone wants them incomplete. Cole waited before speaking again. Evan has already hired private investigators to follow Lily. Raymond's expression did not change, but the room seemed to narrow around him. I told him not to interfere. He believes he is protecting you. Evan believes every locked door is an insult. Raymond called his son. There was no answer. Across the city, Lily rode the train north with her father's key pressed into her palm. She got off near the river and walked half a mile through cold wind to a warehouse divided into rows of rented storage units. At the front desk, she showed her identification, Walter's death certificate, and the probate order naming her administrator. Walter had listed her as the successor authorized to access Unit 306. The manager verified the documents, had her sign the access log, and handed her a temporary gate code. The unit contained one metal chair, 2 cardboard boxes, and a gray steel case small enough to fit beneath an airline seat. Lily tried the key. It opened the case. Inside lay a cassette tape, a portable recorder, and a sealed envelope marked with her name. The note was written in her father's uneven handwriting. Lily, do not listen here. Do not trust anyone who says I was innocent. Beneath it was another instruction. Wait until the first person on the list contacts you. Then play the tape somewhere public. Helen Price had already called. Lily placed the tape and recorder in her bag, returned the note to the case, and heard footsteps in the corridor outside. 2 men in business coats passed the open unit without looking at her. One held a photograph. Lily recognized her own face before he lowered it. She closed the case, signed out at the office, and walked steadily until she reached the street. Only then did she call Detective Marcus Reed, the officer whose name appeared on the report concerning Walter's death. At noon, Marcus entered a small diner on Archer Avenue and found Lily seated in a booth near the front window. He was 39, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a plain brown coat that made him look more like a tired teacher than a police officer. Your message said you found material connected to your father's case, he said. I did. Lily kept both hands around a cup of coffee. The report called his death an accident. The report described an unresolved medical emergency, followed by a delayed request for assistance. That sounds like an accident written by a lawyer. Marcus did not disagree. He had been a junior detective when Walter died 4 months earlier in room 814 at the Marlowe Hotel. By the time he arrived, the guest register had been altered, the hallway camera had failed, and the hotel manager had already spoken with Calder Holdings. Was Raymond Calder there? Lily asked. Marcus looked through the window before answering. I found no official record placing him there. That was not my question. No, Marcus said. It was not. Lily showed him the sealed envelope, the note, and the cassette without handing over the original. Marcus photographed their condition and the storage access receipt, then wrote the date and time in his notebook. Once this becomes evidence, every transfer must be documented, he said. You should have counsel before you surrender it. Until then, do not alter the tape and do not make casual copies. Walter's instructions said to play it somewhere public. Marcus suggested a media room at the Harold Washington Library, where they could use a read-only cassette deck under security cameras and document the first playback. That evening, they placed the cassette in the deck while Lily recorded the uninterrupted session on her telephone. For nearly 2 minutes, there was only a low mechanical hiss. Then Walter Carter's voice emerged, distant but clear. If you are hearing this, Lily, the list worked. She leaned closer. Do not prove what Raymond Calder did. Make him prove he was never in that room. A second voice appeared in the background, too faint to identify. Marcus replayed the passage. The stranger said, he still thinks you are loyal. Near the end, a third voice surfaced beneath the static and spoke one name with quiet certainty. Evan. Marcus stopped the machine, removed the cassette, and placed it in a clean evidence envelope without sealing it. A forensic examiner needs to handle the next copy, he said. Lily stared at the envelope. Evan Calder was there. The tape proves that someone said his name, Marcus replied. The rest still has to be earned. 6 weeks after Lily filed the initial disclosure, the cassette rested in a sealed evidence bag at the office of an independent forensic audio examiner. Claire Donovan, the civil attorney who had agreed to represent Walter's estate, had documented every transfer from Lily to her office and from her office to the examiner. The original remained untouched while a verified working copy was created. The examiner found no obvious splice or interruption, but warned that identifying the speakers would require comparison samples and supporting records. During those 6 weeks, Calder's attorneys had challenged Lily's standing, the relevance of the old names, and the request to preserve hotel records. The probate order survived review. The civil case survived an early motion to dismiss. Most important, the judge entered a preservation order directing the Marlowe Hotel, Calder Holdings, and related contractors to retain guest logs, telephone records, archived electronic files, and conference service documents. Only after that order did Claire issue subpoenas and formal discovery requests. Lily sat across from her in an office above a pharmacy on West 35th Street. The carpet was worn, the coffee was weak, and the conference table leaned slightly toward the window. It was the smallest professional office Lily had ever entered. It was also the first place where no one asked whether she understood what she was doing. Claire spread the initial disclosure across the table. Powerful people rarely survive by telling one perfect lie, she said. They survive by telling different lies to different people. She pointed to Raymond's name. We do not need to prove the entire story at once. We need to establish a good faith basis for his deposition and make him choose which version he wants to protect. Claire drafted questions about Raymond's relationship with Walter, his knowledge of room 814, and Calder Hospitality Services. If he admits he knew your father, he opens one door, she explained. If he denies it, the photograph opens another. Lily placed the banquet photograph on the table. Claire studied it. Helen sent this, Lily said. Helen Price had appeared through an attorney 3 days earlier and signed a sworn declaration explaining that she had lived under her married name after being declared dead in her former name. She confirmed that Walter had maintained recording equipment for Calder Hospitality Services and that the names on his list reflected the people connected to the original Room 814 meeting. She had not yet disclosed everything she possessed. Helen is protecting her leverage, Claire said. That does not make her dishonest. It means she survived long enough to understand the price of information. At Calder Holdings, Cole placed copies of the subpoenas and preservation order in front of Raymond. They are asking about the Marlowe, Walter Carter, Room 814, the old conference system, and every payment made through Calder Hospitality Services. Raymond read every page. Who is representing the girl? Claire Donovan. Raymond remembered the name. 5 years earlier, Claire had represented residents displaced by a Calder development. She had lost the case but forced the company to disclose enough internal correspondence to delay construction for 8 months. She is not careless, Raymond said. No colériplaïd. That is why Evan wants to discredit her. Raymond looked toward the closed office door. What has he done? Evan had contacted reporters, suggested that Lily's lawsuit was financed by political rivals, and urged the Marlowes owners to resist every request. More seriously, he had sent messages asking whether old electronic backups could be overwritten under the hotel's normal retention policy. Cole had preserved copies of those messages after Raymond ordered the hotel to retain everything. If records disappear now, the disappearance becomes more valuable than the records, Raymond said. Evan will say he was protecting the company. Evan is no longer making decisions about this. Before Cole left, Raymond asked, "Did Walter ever work for us directly?" Cole hesitated for less than a second. Raymond noticed. "Not officially," Cole said. "That was not my question." Cole closed the folder. 20 years ago, Walter maintained recording equipment used at several private meetings. He was paid through a hospitality contractor. I approved some of the invoices. Raymond stared at him. "You knew." "I knew he serviced equipment. I did not know he kept copies. And the list. I never saw it before Lily filed." The answer was precise enough to survive a transcript. Raymond understood that Cole had selected each word for future use. "You may be a witness," Raymond said. "Yes," Cole replied. "You need independent criminal counsel. I cannot protect you and testify about the same records." That afternoon, Claire's subpoenas reached 6 organizations. A retired police commander called Cole. A former councilman contacted the mayor's office. The Marlowe's insurer demanded an internal audit. People who had ignored Walter Carter while he was alive suddenly needed to know what his daughter possessed. Lily returned home and found Diane packing dishes into cardboard boxes. Their landlord had declined to renew the lease, citing planned renovations. The building had not been renovated in decades, but its mortgage was held by a bank whose board included a Calder associate. That connection was not proof. It was enough to make the timing feel deliberate. Your father used to say Raymond never needed to sign his name, Diane said. Lily looked at her. Used to. Diane sat down slowly. Walter was not only a maintenance man. He helped them record meetings. He told himself it was technical work that he never decided what happened afterward. How long did you know? Long enough to understand why he was afraid. Lily opened the steel case again and found a thin compartment beneath the lining. Inside was an employee identification card bearing Walter's photograph and the name Calder Hospitality Services. On the back, in Walter's handwriting, were 7 words. Everyone needs Raymond to lie for them. By early September, 10 weeks after Raymond's name appeared on the disclosure, the employee identification card had been authenticated through old payroll tax records and a surviving contractor ledger. Walter Calder had been paid every month for nearly 6 years. Calder Hospitality Services had owned no hotels, hired no public staff, and reported only consulting expenses. Your father was not maintaining buildings, Claire said. He was maintaining access. Lily stared at Walter's photograph on the card. He looked younger, thinner, and more certain of himself. Access to what? Private rooms. Recording systems. People who believed no one was listening. Helen Price's attorney then produced the first real payoff from the witness list. A duplicate accounting ledger from the original Room 814 meeting. Helen had been the bookkeeper who recorded payments routed through hospitality vendors. She had disappeared after refusing to certify a false account and had later lived under her married name. Walter had placed her first because she could verify the financial structure. The second person on the list, a retired police commander, retained counsel within 48 hours of learning that Helen had cooperated. The order was beginning to matter. At Calder Holdings, Raymond met with Mayor Thomas Bell, the police superintendent, and a retired federal judge. These were men who had spent years pretending their friendship with Raymond was accidental. Now each needed him to protect a different version of the past. The mayor wanted reassurance that no campaign records would surface. The superintendent wanted to know whether the old hotel recordings included police officials. The judge asked whether Helen's ledger was genuine. Raymond listened until all 3 stopped speaking. You came here because you believe I know what Lily Calder has, he said. Do you? The mayor asked. No, the single word unsettled them more than any threat could have. Raymond had built his influence by knowing what everyone feared before they admitted it. Ignorance made him dangerous in a new way. Then stop her, the superintendent said. Raymond looked across the table. You have mistaken me for the reason she exists. After they left, Cole entered for what he said would be their final private meeting as attorney and client. He had formally withdrawn because the subpoenas made him a likely witness. The court denied our request to strike your name from the disclosure, Cole said. Your deposition is set for 3 weeks from now. Federal investigators have also opened a parallel inquiry, based on Helen's ledger and Evan's messages to the hotel. Raymond looked at him. What did you produce? Only non-privileged records required by subpoena. Billing ledgers, preservation emails, and a dated administrative note from the week Walter died. You kept a memorandum. I learned from you that memory is safer when someone else has to deny the paper. Cole left without offering his hand. By noon, Lily received a request through Claire for a private meeting with Raymond. Claire objected. Marcus Reed objected more strongly. They finally agreed on the public reading room of the Harold Washington Library, beneath high ceilings, security cameras, and the quiet presence of students. Claire waited 30 feet away. Raymond arrived alone, wearing a dark overcoat and carrying no briefcase. He sat across from Lily at a long wooden table. Your father believed silence was a form of loyalty, Raymond said. My father believed many things that made his life easier. That sounds like Diane. Lily's expression hardened. Do not say my mother's name. Raymond accepted the boundary with a slight nod. Walter worked for people connected to me. He installed equipment. He copied recordings. Later, he kept some of them. Did you know? Not at first. And when you found out? I gave him a choice. Return everything and leave Chicago, or continue working until the risk passed. That was not a choice. Most choices are only choices to people with money. Lily hated him for using truth as if he owned that too. Raymond explained that Walter had recorded judges discussing favors, police officials discussing promotions, contractors discussing public bids, and political donors discussing access. Years later, guilt had driven Walter to organize the names connected to the first meeting in room 814. "Why did my father die in the same room?" Lily asked. Raymond looked toward the tall windows. "Because he chose it. 6 months ago, he called me and said he would release the records unless I met him where everything began. He reserved room 814 under his own name. He wanted the room itself to be part of the accusation. Were you there?" "Yes." It was the first direct admission he had made. Raymond placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a signed statement acknowledging Walter's employment, and a financial offer large enough to buy Diana home and pay every debt Walter had left behind. "Agree not to depose me and narrow the civil claims," Raymond said. "The employment record becomes public. Your father's death receives an independent review. Your mother never worries about rent again." Lily looked at the papers. "What are you protecting? A city that will not become honest simply because I fall." "That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters." Before leaving, he said, "Walter did not build this trap to save you. He built it because he wanted forgiveness from people who could no longer give it." That evening, Lily let the cassette continue beyond the section she and Marcus had first heard. Near the very end of the tape, Walter's voice returned. "Lily, Raymond will tell you I used you. He will be right. I am sorry." A chair moved. Raymond's voice answered, close to the recorder. "Your daughter does not need the whole truth," Walter said. "She will decide that." Then a third voice entered the room. "Father, we have a problem." Lily did not need a forensic comparison to recognize Raymond Calder. The next morning, Lily delivered the sealed cassette to Claire, who transferred it directly to the forensic examiner under a signed chain of custody record. Over the following 12 days, the examiner confirmed that the tape had been recorded continuously on the same machine, found no sign of editing, and matched Raymond's and Evan's voices to verified public recordings with a high degree of confidence. Helen's ledger, Cole's billing records, archived hotel telephone data, and Evan's preservation messages supported the timeline. Claire then provided the original evidence to state and federal investigators through a documented handoff. Nothing happened before sunrise, and no one was charged by evening. The case moved at the slower speed of institutions that knew powerful people would attack every mistake. Over the next 2 months, a federal grand jury heard from Helen Cole, the hotel manager, Marcus Reed, and 2 former Calder associates. Evan's messages about overriding hotel backups, his decision to have Lily followed, and his efforts to pressure the Marlowe became evidence of obstruction rather than mere arrogance. Raymond retained independent criminal counsel. When Evan's attorneys began preparing to blame every decision on him, Raymond made the choice that finally separated father from son. He negotiated a written cooperation agreement. In exchange for truthful testimony about Walter's death, the original Room 814 network, and the officials who helped conceal records, prosecutors agreed to limit the charges they would seek against him. The agreement did not erase independently provable crimes, and any lie would void it. Raymond was not confessing out of remorse. He was choosing which part of his empire he would sacrifice before someone else chose for him. The civil deposition took place by agreement in a secure conference room at the federal courthouse, where the parallel investigation could be protected, and the same testimony preserved under oath. Raymond arrived with his new attorney. Cole, now a subpoenaed witness, was not beside him. Claire sat across from Raymond. Lily sat near the end of the table, close enough to see the pale mark left by his wedding ring. The court reporter asked him to raise his right hand and administered the oath. Raymond stated his name. For the first hour, Claire asked about Calder Hospitality Services, the Marlowe Hotel, and Walter Calder's employment. Raymond admitted that Walter had maintained recording equipment used during private meetings. He admitted that Walter had copied confidential material. He admitted that Walter had summoned him to room 814 on the night of his death, because it was the room where Raymond's original alliance had been formed. Then Claire placed the banquet photograph on the table. "Did you know Walter Calder personally?" "Yes," Raymond said. "Did you previously authorize representatives to deny that relationship?" Yes. Why? Raymond looked toward Lily. Because acknowledging Walter meant acknowledging what he knew. Claire introduced the authenticated recording with the examiner's report. Walter's voice filled the room, followed by Raymond's warning and Evan's arrival. Claire asked whether Evan had come to obtain Walter's files. Raymond said yes. She asked whether Walter had refused to surrender them. Raymond said yes again. She asked whether Walter had suffered a medical emergency while both Calders were present. Raymond's attorney noted the question, then allowed him to answer under the cooperation agreement. Yes. Lily had spent months imagining that moment. She had imagined anger, triumph, even relief. What she felt instead was a quiet emptiness. Claire leaned forward. Who did you call first? Raymond's face changed almost imperceptibly. It was the question Walter had built the entire trap to reach. I contacted the hotel manager, he said. Who did you call after that? The police superintendent. Then, a judge. Then, the mayor's chief of staff. Claire let the order settle into the record. When did anyone request medical assistance? Raymond looked down at his hands. After those calls. No one moved. Raymond had not caused Walter's medical emergency, but he had treated a man's life as a problem of political timing. He had given the city time to coordinate its story before giving Walter a fair chance to receive help. Lily finally spoke. Why? Raymond's attorney started to object, but Raymond raised a hand. Because I believed one man's life was smaller than the structure around me, he said. And because I had spent 20 years surrounded by people who rewarded that belief. 3 weeks later, a federal grand jury returned indictments supported by hotel records, billing ledgers, electronic messages, and witness testimony. Evan was charged with obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. Raymond later pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and making false statements, while continuing to cooperate against public officials and former associates. Mayor Thomas Bell resigned. The police superintendent was placed on administrative leave and later indicted. One by one, the remaining living names on Walter's list retained counsel and began cooperating, not because they had become brave, but because each feared the others would speak first. Months later, Lily and Diane moved into a smaller apartment near the lake. It was not the home Raymond had offered them, but the lease carried no hidden debt. Newspapers called Lily a hero, then a victim, then the poor girl who brought down the most powerful man in Chicago. None of the descriptions felt true. Her father had not been a hero. Raymond had not been the only villain. The city had not been saved by one brave act. It had simply run out of places to hide its agreement with itself. A publisher offered Lily a version of the story in which Walter had resisted corruption from the beginning. She declined. That is not what happened, she said. It is easier for people to understand, the editor replied. That is how the lie started. On the anniversary of Walter's death, Lily returned to the courthouse carrying a new filing that identified families harmed by the recordings her father had helped create. Denise Walker recognized her and asked whether she wanted every name entered into the public record. Lily looked at the final page. Raymond Calder's name was there, but it was no longer larger than the others. Yes, she said. The clerk lowered the seal. The stamp struck the paper with the same hard sound Lily remembered from the first day. But this time it sounded like a door unlocking. Across the city, Raymond sat in an attorney interview room at a federal detention center. Through reinforced glass, he could see a muted television in the common area showing workers removing the Calder name from the hospital wing. A legal call handset rested on the table. For the first time in 20 years, there was no one left he could call who still needed him to lie.